Hello, U.S. history students. Welcome. This is our first e-learning lesson of the year, and I picked a fun little topic for this one. This is about the Electoral College, which is certainly the most peculiar part of our Constitution. So we've been studying the Constitution. We've talked about some of the grandiose parts, some of the remarkable parts that are like true blessings. And this one, is it a blessing? Is it a curse? It's a funny one, right? We're just going to kind of explore that. So our targets today, I can unpack our peculiar way of electing a president, and I can just explain and evaluate the principles of our founding. Some of those are embedded into our funny system, and here we are right now in an election year, right? And we are all going to kind of get our fill of the Electoral College here. We will see it in action soon enough. May it continue to work effectively and clearly. So let's jump in and talk about what this is. I've used this word peculiar a couple times. It's because I'm not trying to say it's bad. I'm not trying to say it's the greatest. It's just it's a funny thing, right? Nobody else in the world has a system like this for picking a president. And even when we advise or talk to other nations about like, hey, you should, we do nation building and try to sort of encourage certain aspects of our Constitution, other countries to try those. We never suggest anyone else tries the Electoral College. It's just a funny, weird way that we have to pick a president. And you might be familiar with it because you are juniors in high school, but you might not be because it's just really not intuitive. So what is it? The Constitution says when we pick a president, the president will not be, like the simple choices might have been, Congress will pick the president. Well, we're not going to do that. A simple choice might have been, we'll just let the American public choose who the president will be. And the founders said, we ain't going to do that either, right? So instead we have an electoral college, right? It's like a filter that stands sort of between the people and the national government, all right? And the Electoral College is a group of people, 500 some odd people, who will actually gather together about a month after the national election, and they will cast the official votes for the president. And this might sound strange to you, or it might not. And for your parents, I don't think any of you guys will be voting here, but for when your parents go vote or when I go vote on this November, I might be voting for, you might think I'm voting for Joe Biden or Donald Trump or someone else, but in reality, I'm not. In reality, what I'm actually voting for, a voter here in Minnesota, like it says, a voter is voting for whether to send Minnesota has 10 members in the Electoral College. Are we going to send our 10 Republican members of the Electoral College? Or are we going to send our 10 Democratic members to meet in the Electoral College, right? Are Minnesota's votes going to go Republican or Democrat? All 10 of our members of the Electoral College, all right? And again, it sounds sort of odd, but it's like every state sends these delegates. Every state sends these members to meet in the Electoral College to make the official choice. Now, way back in the original, in the first, 10, not even 10, the first maybe half dozen elections, those state electors weren't like tied to the state's popular election results like they are today. So today, let's just say Joe Biden wins Minnesota, right? And then all 10 of Minnesota's Electoral College voters all 10 of Minnesota's Democratic Electoral College voters would go to the Electoral College to cast votes for the Democrat, Joe Biden. That's how it is today. Like our Electoral College votes are tied to how the public voted in Minnesota. Back in the day, that wasn't always the case. In some places it was, but in some places, like the state legislature might pick, or there might be a special convention called at each state, and they would decide. It was different systems in different states. We have to recall, if we're getting into like, why would we set this up? Like the founders did not want a national government that was too strong, and they also feared the people, right? Or they were wary of the wisdom of the people, or they really believed that the wisdom of the people was fairly limited, right? And so to just hand the keys to this powerful office off to just a straight up public vote is not what they wanted. They wanted to kind of have some filters in place, and that's what the Electoral College represents. Now, why would they have built this, right? There's different reasons why. Some of the reasons why aren't really applicable in 2020. Some of the reasons why are extremely applicable in 2020. So One reason why they built it that is not really that relevant today is the idea that like a cooling mechanism, right? We're going to take the public, which can be hot-tempered, right, and volatile and a little crazy about politics or a little foolish about politics, the founders would say. We're going to take the keys away from them, or we're going to say, look, we're listening to you, the public, but we're going to kind of we're going to let you influence the smaller group of electors and let them make the actual decision. Now, that's not really relevant today because today each state's electors in the Electoral College are tied directly to how the popular vote in that state went. So that reason has kind of faded over time. All right, it's not applicable today. The one that is applicable is the founders said, another thing we worry about is that one candidate could get a ton of support in a couple populist states. And so back in that day, that might have been, let's just say, Philadelphia and Virginia, all right? And Philadelphia and Virginia, plus a couple other places, if they can dominate in those places, sort of a niche candidate that otherwise in New England or parts of the Deep South, there was no recognition of, or that candidate was a non-issue, that person could get enough votes to become president. And what the founders wanted was, they said, we want to make a way where anyone who is elected president is going to have to be able to get votes in a lot of different kinds of states, in a lot of different regions. Right? They can't just be one niche candidate in one niche type of state in one niche place, right? So they have to be a broad base. They have to build a coalition. To win in the Electoral College system, you have to build a coalition in a lot of different kinds of states. Now that is still the case, and that is still very real. That very much shapes our presidential politics today. The reality that you can't just win New York and California. You can't just win, Texas and Colorado. You're going to have to just win a whole bunch of different kinds of states in order to get enough. Remember, the founders had this notion that it's dangerous if 51% in our system, if achieving 51% lets you do anything you want, then the 49% are going to be trampled on. So the founders sort of built in all these limiting mechanisms to prevent a narrow majority from going too far. The Electoral College is one of those. Right? So the Electoral College says, why don't you try building a much broader, bigger coalition? That'll help your chances. In the Electoral College system, the way it works, it's certainly the case that California has more influence than Minnesota. All right. I mean, I love Minnesota, but we just don't have as many people. Right? We're not as big a deal as California or New York or Texas. I get it. It's certainly the case that California has much bigger influence than North Dakota. And that's appropriate, right? But what is also the case is that North Dakota, and to a lesser degree Minnesota, we get to sit on a booster seat, right? We're made a little bit more important than if it were the case that it was just a straight up popular vote and we count up the votes of all the people in the United States and whoever gets more becomes the president. This system takes smaller states, and if we're all sitting at the table together having a big discussion, it gives us smaller states a little bit of a booster seat. We still aren't the big deal that New York, California, Texas are, but we're a bigger deal than if there were no Electoral College, if that's starting to make any sense. How do we know how many votes, electoral votes each state gets? Well, it's a simple mechanism. We sort of take the number of senators, and of course, you remember every state has 2 senators, plus the number of representatives. And you remember that big states have a lot of representatives in the House of Representatives, and small states just have 1, right? So the smallest number that you could have would be 3. That's the smallest number of electoral votes you could have. And the largest number you can have, well, right now happens to be California with its 55. All right, California is a big deal. They get 55 votes in the Electoral College. We have 10. All right, and Wisconsin has 10 too, so no worries. Like, none of us can sort of claim dominion over the other there. And we're better than Iowa, that's for sure, with their 6, and the Dakotas, which just have 3. But you can see we aren't the big deal that some of them are, like Pennsylvania with their 20, Florida with their 29, right? But it's also the case that you can minimize the advantage of, let's say, New York with its 29 and California with its 55 if you just start putting a few of the Midwestern states together, right? Or if you rack up all the Western states plus some of the Southern states, you can start putting big numbers together, right? If it's just straight up popular vote, then there's no reason to pay attention to most of the big Western states, maybe aside from Colorado and certainly California. But now there is, right? And so this system says you have to pay attention to lots of different kinds of states. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, anyone else wanting to run for president, you cannot just be president of California and New York. You cannot just be president of the coasts. You also cannot just be the president of the Midwest, or small town America, or the South. You have to generate appeal across a broad number of states in this system. You might look at this map and be like, okay, so try and figure out for a second, what's the significance of the blue spots versus the gray area? The answer is half of the population of the United States lives in the blue spots. All right, our population is not broadly and generally distributed. It is really clustered in certain places and certain spots. The Electoral College says certainly those places are really important. Those big states are really important, but we're not going to make this be the case where an election can simply ignore all the gray. You're going to have to pay attention to the gray as well as the blue. Sounds like I'm talking about the Civil War. Same kind of idea here, right? An equal number of people live in the blue spaces as live in the red space, right? That's Los Angeles County. That is the same population. What this means is, well, just consider for a second, how would national elections, how would a presidential election look different without the Electoral College system? How would the focus of presidential candidates look different without this system? It would be a mighty different system and a whole different set of campaigns. And a lot of us who live in gray spots would be more or less ignored. we wouldn't really be all that significant in the big scheme picture of things because, you got to make your money where the population is. The Electoral College says, look, it's the case that sparsely populated places aren't as important, but we're going to give them that booster seat. A couple of political cartoons expressing different points of view on it, all right? Without the popular vote, it says the coastal states swamp out the flyover states, as it were. The Electoral College creates a bit of balance between them, or it suggests a bit of balance. I think it has some interesting advantages, but I also know, like for my friends in Canada, if they bring up what's with this Electoral College, it's like, well, that's kind of a weird one. That's all right. We're a weird country. So you'll get a chance to respond and tell me what you think. And that's it for now. Thank you guys for your good work on Monday here, and we'll talk soon. See you tomorrow. Bye.